I want to thank everyone for coming out. This is Fall River Unified. We found out the name last night from our friends. We've got a whole list of events that we're going to be working on through the summer to try to engage people in a bunch of positive things for the community. And one of the things we talk about frequently in this group is social justice issues related to fairness, equality, and it's something that we need to have conversations like this in Fall River. I've met a lot of great people since we started this little program, and tonight is going to be a special chance to listen. You don't need me. I'll go to the back of the room as soon as we introduce this. We need people, if they have questions about what it's like in their role as police officers in the city of Fall River, what their responsibilities are, what's good about the job, what's not so good. We know that our chief will not hold it against them. We want this to be an open and frank discussion about the things that impact their ability to function as officers in the city of Fall River. And again, it's not about me. We're not going to be taking photo ops. This isn't one of those things. It's an opportunity to listen. And that's what I want to stress. It's an opportunity to listen to the people that are on the front lines doing this work for the city of Fall River. So that's enough for me. Blathering on, I want to introduce our new Chief of Police, which can give you a little better intro, and then we're going to leave it up to the officers. Jeff Cardoza.
Thank you, man. So, I think some of you folks in this room know that I've been looking forward to this for about 3 or 4 weeks right now, getting this panel together where the officers can answer some questions. And I just want you to know that I've told all the officers to be completely honest. I don't care if it involves when they're working, when they're not working. Whatever questions you ask, I just ask that they be respectful questions, and the officers are told to answer them honestly. But let me just mention that I'm hoping that this eventually segues into the mayor and I have talked about putting together some type of recruitment unit or team where some of these officers, if not everyone that's in this room, maybe a few others, will be involved in going to the high schools, Bristol Community College, UMass Dartmouth, Roger Williams, and trying to recruit more diverse people for the department, because we truly, really believe that we need to do that. So let me introduce the panel. I got Sergeant Kelly Furtado, who has been on as long as I have, and I won't get into how many years that is. She's got a very, very diverse background, if you will. We have Officer Zach Loon, right? Am I pronouncing that correctly? He's assigned to the Uniform Patrol Division. Steve Washington, he's been on a long time as well. He's assigned to the Uniform Patrol Division. He has a very diverse background as well. Marquise Pius, he's one of our newer officers assigned to the Uniform Division. And last but not least, Detective Moses Pereira, who's assigned to the Major Crimes Division.
What we envisioned was each of you would make an opening statement, 3 to 5 minutes, talk about where you're from, how you came to be a policeman in Fall River, and then talk a little bit about your job, highs and lows, and I'm hoping that'll lead to some questions after the panel hears it. So again, if you do a little brief introduction, that would really help everybody to get to know you. And we can start right on the end and go right across.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Moses Pereira. I'm a detective with the Major Crimes Division, as the chief has stated. I've been a member of the Fall River Police Department for 6 years now. I grew up in the city of Fall River. In the city of New Bedford. I apologize. I married a woman who's from the city of Fall River, so we moved here. I have 3 children, all of which we raised here in Fall River, going through the Fall River public school system. And I chose to become a member of law enforcement because I felt I wanted to do something that served the community that I lived in and that I was raising my family in. Prior to law enforcement, I was in the financial industry. I was a customer service manager at a large bank. But I felt like I wanted to do more, and I felt like I wanted to make an impact, a greater impact on people's lives, which is why I felt this would have been a great avenue for me to pursue. As far as my day-to-day responsibilities as a detective, mainly what happens is I'm assigned cases, for the most part, that occurred the previous day. So I'm following up on instances that a lot of these officers here that I'm sitting with investigate primarily, and then they turn it over to me, and with the work of my peers as well as the community, we hope to bring justice to the victims who are victimized in any form of crime. Thank you.
Well, my name is Officer Marquise Pius. I've been with the department for about a couple of years now. Originally from New Bedford, born and raised. I've always been interested in law enforcement. Honestly, just the really help. And I remember, back when I was a kid, growing up in my neighborhood, it was a tough neighborhood in New Bedford. I actually grew up in housing projects, and we had walking beats, and made a very lasting impression on me, like it made me feel safe, and obviously showed that obviously all cops are not bad, cops are human, and so I pursued a career here. I moved here about 7 years ago, and I enjoy it. I really do. I love my job, every day. I'm actually assigned to this area over here downtown, and my biggest thing is when I got on the job, especially in my interview, community policing, interacting with the public, showing the human side, and obviously that I can relate to a lot of people out here, and that's my biggest thing,
Hey, my name is Officer Stephen Washington. I've been on the force for 26 years. I am from the great state of New York. I joined the military at a very young age in the Navy. I was in Newport, Rhode Island. After 4 years of the Navy, I decided to take the exam. I did not want to be a police officer. I never thought about being a police officer. I couldn't stand police officers. I grew up in a pretty rough lifestyle. My mother was an addict. My oldest brother passed away, he was an addict. My second oldest brother is in prison right now. So I never wanted to be part of this, but it was money. Straight up, it was money. I took the job. I ended up being lucky by being able to serve as a major crimes division, vice intelligence unit, housing unit, special ops unit, and then now I'm in uniform division where I patrol the Flint area. I'm a little different when it comes to policing because I believe in two things. I believe things are morally right and things are legally right. And I turn to being morally right rather than being legally right. So a lot of the times people might say it's shirking, but I just think it's morality. And that's just where I come from.
Hi, my name's Sakan Wan. I've been with the Fall River Police Department for about 6 years, but prior to that, I was first hired in 2015 to the Little Compton Police Department. That's where I started my law enforcement career. I just felt like I wasn't making a difference out there. There was it was a lovely community, but there was about 9 police officers total, counting the chief, and I just felt like I just wanted more. So from there, I moved to the Tiverton Police Department, got a little closer to Fall River. I was there for a few years. I still felt like I wasn't making a difference. So, and then eventually I got hired here in Fall River. Currently I'm in assigned uniform division, but mainly I serve subpoenas, restraining orders, and deal with Section 35 warrants. Like Steve, I didn't want to be a police officer. Growing up, I'm first generation, Cambodian. So my parents fled Cambodia in 1979. They came here to the United States looking for a better life. I was born here in the U.S. and then my father taught me, he's like, all right, go to school, get an education, get a good job. So that's what I tried to do. I have an older brother. He went to school, went to college, got a good job. He does stuff with computers. With me, I went to college. I grew up in Fall River. I grew up with TJ, Mr. Bailey's brother. After college, I really had no direction in life. I came back. I was a substitute teacher at Durfee. I was an assistant track coach at Durfee. Somehow I just started, became friendly with other police officers, and which led me in the direction to the field. And I'm here now. So, thank you.
Hi, I'm Sergeant Kelly Furtado. In my 33rd year at the Fall River Police Department. I started when I was 18 as a dispatcher. When I was 19, I took the police test. I did always want to be a police officer. My father was a police officer. He was very proud to be a police officer in the city. I grew up in the South End. I've served in many different roles in the police department, the uniform division, the major crimes division, domestic violence unit, the SRO. I was an SRO at Durfee for many years, and then I became a supervisor, and I took over the last year the SRO supervisor's position. However, next Saturday I'll be starting as a supervisor in the night watch in uniform division. I have 5 boys, and one of them is a police officer. He's been on a year here in Fall River. The rest are all in the trades. My husband's also the night lieutenant, and I love Fall River, and it's like no other city. The community here, the relationship throughout the years that I have seen between the police department and the community is second to none. When I went to major crimes, I could see that other big police departments always came to Fall River, always knew that we would take care of what needed to be taken care of. We are definitely head and shoulders above a lot of other places, as is this community, the community groups, the strong belief in community policing.
Okay. So I'm hopeful that some people have some questions or comments.
I guess I'll start.
Yeah,
I know you're starting at the voice.
that's why you're here. That's
So I'm a part of the Fall River Unified, as well as the ladies behind me, and there's a few other members who aren't present today. And for myself, my name's Amber, I'm born and raised in Fall River, and we're just trying to get some sort of a semblance of how our community can come together. Obviously, when we had a meeting 2 weeks ago, and we had talked about having the police officers come, and I had actually spoke to Marquise yesterday for the first time, meeting him here yesterday before our meeting. And we're just trying to figure out what we can do to come together to be better. Personally, I've had one experience in my entire life with a police officer. That was a negative one. It was probably the worst day of my life, and it was in Fall River. And to this day, I feel very uncomfortable whenever I see this police officer. So it's one of those things where I'm an individual who follows the law, do everything that I'm supposed to do, and this police officer admitted the fact that because I was a certain color in a certain neighborhood at a nighttime, that's the reason why she did the things that she did. And that changed my life for the rest of my life. So I'm here now to make sure that I'm also an adult when this happened to me. If this happens to a 13-year-old kid, 12-year-old kid, 18-year-old kid, that's much more that they have to deal with when they don't have their emotions in check at that point. So at this point, I just want to make sure that everyone that's on this panel, and also whoever's working for the police force in Fall River, holds each other accountable. All the things that are happening right now, George Floyd could be alive if those officers would have stepped in. And I think it's amazing that we have minority officers here, and I said this the other day, but we also need to have officers that are white here as well. We also need to make sure that every single person that's on this police force is on the same page. And that's what's important to me. I know I don't really have many questions because we had talked yesterday, and if you guys want to talk about your experiences, anything you guys experienced as a kid that made you want to become a police officer to do better, I'm completely open to hearing about that. But I also think that it starts with making sure everyone who's on the police force now, making sure if they have a lot of instances on their jackets that they're making, like you as the sergeant, you're making sure, or the chief, you're making sure that they're not going to keep continuing doing what they're doing, all this bad behavior, and then they stay on the force.
Yeah. So what you're talking about is accountability, and we talked about this before. One of the things we're doing right now, the officers that work in the Fall River Police Department are already trained not to use chokeholds. It's something that, and I'm getting into 8 Can't Wait a little bit. It's something that they're trained never to do. But we're actually going to, what we're doing right now is we're reviewing our use of force policy, and we're actually going to put it in our policy where it's prohibited. So it'll be written. Okay, that's accountability. Another thing that we're doing is the officers are trained to intervene. There's a case in Massachusetts that goes way back into the early 90s that talks about officers are required to intervene if there's something going on. We talk about that. That's part of our training as well. In fact, right after George Floyd, we put out a training memo reminding everybody that they have a duty to intervene. But what we're going to do is we're going to go a step further as part of 8 Can't Wait, and we're going to actually put it in our use of force policy. So our use of force policy is like 59 pages. We're going to try to shrink it down, make it easier for the public to understand, because we're going to share it with the public. But we're also going to put some of those things in there so there's written accountability, the things that you're talking about. I want to say this though, I've been here 30 years, I'm in my 30th year, and I'm really proud of, I'm not going to tell you that I haven't seen things like misconduct or people acting inappropriately, because I have. But I'm proud that it's not systemic. It's not something that I see going on or that I feel that is a major issue in our police department. So I just want to mention that. All right, I'll ask if you don't mind me, I'd like to ask a question. I don't know who wants to hear, maybe Steve, you could answer it. What's it like being black and working in a predominantly, we have 8 black officers working in a predominantly white, if you will, profession?
Profession?
Profession.
I couldn't answer that question because it's not about the profession. So for me, I look at this whole thing, and I'd like to ask you guys questions because I think it's more important. But I look at it like 2 ways. I look at an equation, right? You have a sum, and you have the equation. If I just came up to you and said, what's 4? You'd look at me like I'm out of my mind. But if I said, what's 2 plus 2, you would say, what's 4? So we're working from 4 and not 2 plus 2, right? So we're trying to be reactive, where we need to be proactive. It's almost impossible to do when it's already implanted in people's heads, right? I've had many incidents where I wanted to quit this job, right? Totally wanted to quit this job because of racism, right? But I didn't do it, you know what I mean? I kept trucking on, I figured that by me being here, it would change. It's almost impossible to change at the end of it. So I also look at it as a tree. Our whole problem that we're having right now is the tree. But everything else is the branches. You can't change someone's ego problem. You can't change someone's way they grew up. You can't change any of that. So how do we work on those things, right? It's almost impossible to do. So a forum, a rally, right? And I'm sure you heard this before, right? What's the last 4 letters in rally? A-L-L-Y, ally. So we need each other. We don't have that, right? Now we have you against us. Every time Black Lives Movement or anyone else puts something about George Floyd or anyone else who was killed by the police, then you have a police officer who, this is social media too, right? Then you have a police officer who posts something about, well, what about Chicago and this and that, and then what about this? So you go tick for tat. Little kids. I look at it like, if I'm a police officer, you're going 100 miles per hour down the highway, and the car in front of you is going 105, and I pull you over going 100, and you roll down the window and go, well, what about him? I'm going to look at you like you're crazy, right? And that's what we're doing right now, right? Every time you guys say something to us, we say something back to you. So when do we have that conversation where it's just even, right? We always hear about the problems, the issues. Oh, I had this problem. I had that problem. I can tell you many. I tell you a story right now that you'd be like, oh my God, but it's irrelevant. Right? It's irrelevant. Right now we need to talk about what we do to get together and not apart, right? An awesome, smart man once told me, we build bridges, not tear them down. All right, so that's just where I'm at with that.
Go ahead.
How are you guys? And my name is Asia Grice. Thank you all for coming. I am just a community mother living in Fall River. I have a few questions, but before I start, I just want to say that I'm a firm believer in what's true of the part is not true of the whole, meaning that one bad apple doesn't spoil the whole batch. However, we're at a time now where we want to just take a look at that batch, and any bad apples that are in there, we want to get them out, because as we all know, if we leave that bad apple in there, it's going to just destroy the whole batch. So I also wish that the panel had more white officers as well. However, I do have a few questions, but they're more just for dialogue back and forth between us all. My first question is, how do you feel personally about the racial tension between the police and the community? Do you feel as police officers that there is an attack on you guys?
I think the current climate as a whole is unfortunate. But I will say, here in the city of Fall River, the citizens that I interact with on a daily, weekly basis, I really haven't seen or felt much tension. People usually approach and they share, their opinions and their thoughts and their feelings, and I share mine. But it's always been respectful here in the city of Fall River. I can say that we haven't had any large incidences or large gatherings where it became violent or really confrontation. Really, people, sharing a dialogue, which is largely important, and that's the reason why we're here this evening, to have a dialogue with one another and to kind of, share our opinions, our thoughts, and our experiences.
Personally, like just with the world, with how it's moving, just do you feel like it's a us against them type of ordeal? Like just, again, it's open, you know what I'm saying? Or do you just feel like, oh, everything is just all...
I think as a whole, if you look at what's going on as a whole, it's certainly being portrayed as an us against them, right? I think anybody would agree that it's a us against them type of situation. We have to get away from that. And we have to really dig deeper and search for the root of the problem and find the root of the problem, whether it be better training, better initiatives, revisions of our policies and procedures to ensure certain things don't happen here in our department. That's something that we here in Fall River, we can handle and we can take control of, and the chief's already doing so. But as far as countrywide, yeah, I'd say it right now it's us against them type of mentality.
No, thank you so much for like your honesty. You guys like have a feeling personally, like how do you feel? Like does it feel like an us against?
It's stressful.
Thank you.
It's stressful because like you want to shout out like, hey, we're not like that. You know what I mean? I have a family, I have a grandson. It's not like that. We're being beaten up in the media, but yet we throw on this uniform, and now yet you're throwing on your uniform and driving here, and I had to run back into my house and said, I had to get my jacket because I walked my niece out, and my niece said, Auntie Kelly, you can't leave without covering your uniform. And she got all teary-eyed. And I'm like, oh, well, listen, I'm fine. But I went back in my house and got my jacket to cover my uniform, where before I never had to do that. You know what I mean? But it makes me so sad because in this area, we don't experience that here. We have a great community partnership. We have had SROs in the school system since 1978, before that was even cool, before that was even a thing. And it was more about building relationships with kids than actually doing police work. You know what I mean? We did programs, we started the open gym program, we started the Teen Police Academy, we started doing all kinds of things like that, And my husband I was so upset one night, but my husband told me, he says, Kelly, that's here, but you have to take yourself out of here and think about someplace else. It might be that way someplace, and I think that that's what happens. I think that we're not affected, or it doesn't touch us, just like crime. If you've never been a victim of crime, you're like, what do we need cops for, right? Well, you gotta step outside your bubble. And my son, the one that's a policeman now, was in the Navy, and I had told Steve here, I said, oh, we gotta drive down to Florida and bring Christopher some stuff. He finally got stationed down, it's actually in Georgia, and we're staying in Fernandina Beach, and he goes, oh, watch out there. I says, what? He goes, most racist people ever lived there. And I said, well, then I don't need to worry. He goes, yes, you do. You're from the north. Right? And he started laughing. He started goofing. We had this banter back and forth, like laughing, right? And then, sure enough, we're driving in, right? And before we're going to go to the condominium, I'm like, let's eat, because we got in late. It says, let's eat and then go. This way we don't have to leave. Well, I go into Applebee's, and this waiter comes over, and he takes out, we order a couple beers, and then he looks at us, and then he leaves. right? And then I'm like, then this woman comes on, she says, oh, I'm gonna be your waitress, your waitress tonight. I'm like, what happened to him? Because I can see me sitting at the bar now, right? And she's like, I doesn't really like Northerners. I'm like, what? So we tipped that girl so good just to make, I says, can you tell him how much we over tipped you? She goes, oh, I certainly will. You know, but yeah, I think that, but I think sometimes I have trouble like with do people just don't like black people or don't like Asian people or don't like white people? Sometimes I think people are just jerks. Do you know what I mean? They don't like anybody. Is that not true? Right? I think sometimes people are just jerks, and they would not like anybody. They wouldn't like Mother Teresa if she walked in. She'd find something wrong with that, you know? But again, we don't experience that here, you know? With police work, I think a lot of times this is an extremely stressful job. Extremely, extremely stressful job. You work a lot of hours. I think being tired has a big part of it. The hours we work and the constant stress all the time. I think that sometimes people do make mistakes and say something that they don't really mean, or they project anger when really what they really want, especially like with men, like what they really want to say, hey, you know what? That call, the baby that just died, that really bothered me. But instead, they'll walk into the station, they'll be screaming and flipping out, you know, and really, it's like, they probably should just have a good cry, you know?
I just wanted to just touch on a little bit of the, see that here. Growing up, I'm a Florida resident. I grew up in Fall River. Went to college. I live in California now. Came back. I know Washington very well. I had a great relationship with him growing up. Honestly, like my family looked up to him because there was a lot of trust in our community. But I think that's one of the biggest misconceptions, that we don't deal with that here, because ultimately, as a black man growing up in Fall River and as a kid, I went through a lot of instances myself, whether being searched, pulled over, and always had this fear when police get behind me that I'm going to get pulled over and something's going to happen. Well before this, we had a lot of police interactions as kids, where if it wasn't him coming down and we wasn't talking about it, or certain officers that we could talk to, there was no relationship. Obviously, I got a lot older, educated myself, got outside the city, hyper-focused on things that were going on in the city. But I think that's one of the biggest misconceptions. As a black man that grew up in this city, I think it still kind of does, and people overlook it. Similar to her, I've had instances where I got pulled over, only one pulled out of the car, not a gun pulled on me, but wondering what's going on. Growing up in the city, it has happened. I don't know what it's like now. I know there are some great officers on the force, because like I said, I've always looked up to guys like Washington and a few other guys like Bob Plant, and I have friends that are on the force now. So the reason why, like talking to her, why I really wanted to come too, is just kind of to hear people out. And similar to them, I wanted to ask some white officers some questions too, just to kind of see where things at. Because as a black man in America, everything that's going on, it affects you. We've all carried these things with us for time, and although we don't talk about them, they still happen. I was watching a video, and not to get too graphic, but someone was saying, if you went to school with a girl who was sexually assaulted and she never tells anyone, does that mean it didn't happen? And now that you know it happened, what are you going to do about it? So I think a lot of people carry that and they don't say anything, especially some people in their profession, where the profession is deemed to be inclusive, but are you truly being your full self, and you can say those things? So your perspective might be a little bit different than mine, but when people say, oh, those things don't happen here, it almost feels like a smack in the face.
Bob, you know what's gonna happen is this. You have to understand who police are, right?
Yeah.
We're very black and white. The occupation, very black and white, meaning the standard operating procedure, right? We go by books. So I pull you, perfect example is this. You have a car with a broken headlight, but you're Bobby Bailey. You're driving down 5th Street, 5 o'clock in the morning, or 2 o'clock in the morning, right? No drug area, whatever, blah, 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 blah. I'm talking about report writing, right? I'm pulling you over I'm taking you out of the car. I'm searching for something. I don't care about your broken headlight. Police are taught that that's a tool. You get what I'm saying? But it's legal. It's legal to do. You get what I'm saying? So now me and you, we know why they're doing it. You get what I'm saying? So it's like, whose job is it, right? Now everyone, it's easy for the police to say, well, don't have a broken headlight. But it's more difficult for him to say, be nice to people, right? I learned from someone not a long time ago, she taught me something. Mean what you say what you mean, but don't say it mean.
Yeah.
Right? So it's about communication. It's how you talk to people. It's how people, you're never gonna get, everyone says, oh, I wish you get a white police officer. You're not gonna get a straight answer. Do you think a white police officer is gonna say, listen, I don't like niggers? It's not gonna happen. You know what I mean? I'll tell you a little quick story. I first got on the job. A year on the job, right here on probation. I'm on the job for about 2 months. I was assigned to the housing projects, right? I walked 40th Street, but this time I was walking Heritage Heights. Now at the time, I thought it was a big bad man. I thought it was gonna be like super cop and all the rest of that stuff, right? I didn't know any other police officer on this job. From New York, didn't know anyone. Fall River Celebrates America, if anyone remembers that, right? Down there, I'm walking Heritage Heights. A black male had just stabbed someone at the park. I'm excited now because they said he's running up towards Heritage. Me being a brand new officer, I'm catching this guy, you know what I mean? I'm gonna be the man, I'm getting the paper. Kid comes running out of the backyard, boom, tackle him, put him to the ground. Call it out on the radio, cruisers come, there's like 3 cruisers. One of the police officers says to me, did you search him? I go, yeah. To this day, 26 years, to this day, I know exactly what I took out of his pocket. It was a joint, a quarter, house keys, and a wallet. I put it in the car. He said, do me a favor, bring him to the station. This is when we were over here on Bedford Street, so I had to go to High Street. Bring him in there, we had this booking room, we had this little wooden box where they put the belongings in there. The kid says, hey, where's my wallet? I said, don't worry about it. I said, the police officer who arrested you is gonna bring it. Who is that? I don't know his name. You'll bring it, no big deal. I'm excited, I just thought this kid stabbed somebody. I go home. I get a phone call the next day, say I have to come into the station and write a report because I stole $500 from this kid. I have never stolen in my life. I don't need to steal $500, I can do details for $500. So, I do the report, I think everything is cool, it is what it is. The next day they call me in internal affairs. At this time, in that station, there was a room where they have roll call. All right? Internal Affairs was upstairs, but for some reason I'm downstairs next to this room with a table, a tape recorder, and a big book. It's during shift changes now. The door wide open. They open up the book. Inside the book is pictures of every police officer. Like a booking photo, but like ID. Pick out everybody who was there. People like this. I'm like, I'll be totally honest with you what I said. I said, they all look alike. I said, I don't know, they all look alike. And they were like, all right, whatever, you're gonna get fired. Told me I'm gonna get fired, right? I'm scared, I'm in my mind, I'm gonna get fired for this, it's crazy, I didn't take anything. Long story short, they ended up doing an investigation, they found the guy who did it. He took the money, right? The union president at that time tells this guy, just tell them that you have a problem with black people so you can go to diversity training and everything will be all smooth. SOP, black and white, that's all he has to do. I don't know whether he resigned, whatever, but after that day, I remember an old Chief Racine told me, I'm surprised you stayed on the job after that. Because that's where we were at. In cahoots with that, I was walking Heritage Heights and a police officer comes down. Back then, we're working, we bring our own cars to the projects, we walk around. This police officer comes in a uniform car, he gets out, he goes, hey, do me a favor. I go, what's that? He said, tell Internal Affairs that you put everything on the hood and that everyone from Fall River Celebrates America, anyone could have taken it. I said, absolutely not, because that's not what happened. He's like, what are you talking? You know what I did? I know a lot of you. Started undoing my thumb belt. Ready to go? I'm ready to go, you know what I mean? It's like, but that's the kind of things we have to deal with as well. but we're so black and white. You're not going to get the answers. It's not that simple, right? We're sitting here saying we should have white officers here, we should talk. It's not that simple, right? It's like someone, if you're a Christian, it's like someone saying you're a sinner. You don't want to be called a sinner, so you don't talk about that. You talk about all the good you do. You don't talk about the bad. We can sit all day long and tell you how many babies I saved and this and that, but I'm not going to tell you how many people I smacked in the face. Because it just doesn't work like that, right? It sucks, but it doesn't work like that until we get into a forum like this where we can say it, right? So I get what you're saying. I don't think anyone's going to understand what you go through or what I've been through or any of these other officers have been through, but that saying goes, it is what it is, right? It is what it is. You educated yourself. You're a smarter man now. I'm sure that if I pulled you over right now, it'd be a little different story than if I pulled you over in 2000, right? You get what I'm saying? You and your brother, I love your brother, I love him, you know what I mean? Smart as I'm proud of your brother like anything. You know, but that's just the way it goes, and that's the things we do. I don't believe in community policing. I don't think it's a good word, right? I think policing is policing. I don't think it's community policing because we all of the community. You know, and if you think about why community policing was even started, that's another whole story. We won't get into that, but that's just the way it goes. You know.
I just want to mention that one of the things I want now in the scenario that you talked about when it's being pulled over is not just to walk away. I want the officer to provide an explanation. It needs to be a reasonable explanation, not I just pulled you over because I felt like it. I think if we do a better job communicating, like Officer Washington talked about, what's the reason? And like you said, you're going to see through it if it's a fake reason. Now, obviously, there's a way to address that, and I hope people feel comfortable. I had one gentleman tell me that he's afraid to walk into the building. I don't want that. That's his building. He lives in this city. It's not my building. It's his building. So I want people to come forward with that kind of stuff, because the only way I'm going to know if there's a problem with an officer is if his or her peers tell me, or someone from the public tells me. I'm just not going to know. So what I want to see the cops that work in this city do is provide an explanation. You have everyone has a reason for a right to ask. Why are you pulling me over? Why are you stopping me? Why are you encountering me? And I expect a respectful and honest answer.
And just to touch on that, I agree with you. You should be able to ask, why am I being pulled over?
Yep.
But when in instances, you automatically start getting screamed at because I did. And it's like, well, what do you do in that instance? Yep. There's only one officer here, but I know we talked yesterday, you guys are working on getting body cams, but there's no cam. Like, what do you do in that instance? And it's like, you just have to comply because you want to make sure that you get home at night. And it's one of those things where you can say, if we have white officers here, they're not going to talk about it, and it's just going to get swept under the rug, but at what point is there too much under this rug?
Can I just say something to that point? I don't know if you realize that police officers are suspended, they're reprimanded, they're sent for counseling on a regular basis, like all the time. We are probably held, and rightfully so, to a higher standard than anyone else. We, right, Chief? I'm sure everybody here will agree to that point. However, there are some things that I think that we as minority officers, right? I was one of 3 female officers coming up through the ranks. Now there's much more. But sometimes when you're that person, and I don't want this to come out wrong, you think everything's about your minority. Do you know what I mean? Like, people say, someone said to me, you don't have to tell your boys how to behave when the police stop them. I said, you're wrong. Every one of my kids, every one of my boys went through this is what happens when you're stopped. You pull over. They're teenagers. They were stopped all the time. All the time. They had lowered cars, Jettas, and they were stopped all the time. And
the conversation you have with your white children as an officer is much different than a black woman has to have with her black son. And I'm only saying this because there's certain things that a black man has to deal with that your white children will never have to deal with. And it's not their fault, but at the same time, it's not his fault either. Mm-hmm. And you're a police officer. My mom is white. She never had conversations with me. I grew up with a lot of black friends, and they were the ones who had those conversations, because my mom never had to deal with that stuff, because she is a white woman. So you can sit here and say you had those conversations with your son, but can you say you would have had those conversations if you were not a police officer?
Yes, yes. Well, you know what, in all fairness, I don't know, because I don't know if I would have that experience to do that.
And that's where I'm coming from. So my mom never had those experiences.
My father told me the same thing, but he added that I'd also get a beating though afterwards.
I think every parent, I think it's important for every parent, regardless, to have a conversation with their child, how to interact with the police, with the general public. I have children. One of my children is 19 years old. He has a car. He chose a car that's fast, loud, so he gets pulled over from time to time. So did we have that conversation? Yes, we had the conversation. I let him know, you deal with them respectfully. Yes, sir, yes, ma'am. You have a conversation as you would if you were at work and you're speaking with the customer. Yes, sir, yes, ma'am. The conversation should be the same. Now I understand, I'm Cape Verdean, so I grew up in New Bedford. I had some interactions with the police. None of them were negative. I can't say any of them were negative interactions with the police. But I do understand that the conversation should be had, but not just black parents with their black children. Every parent with every child should be taught how to interact with the police. I think it's important.
Or adults, just adults. I feel like we've gotten away from the respect for each other, for anyone.
Hi, thank you all for being here. My name is Karina Valencia. I am a resident native of Fall River. I went to the public schools here. I'm a first-generation immigrant with a European Portuguese mom and a Mexican dad. I'm also one of the co-founders with Nikita Vieira of FR Pride, which is our only youth-oriented LGBTQ+ organization here. So, just to comment briefly on some of the stuff that's been said most recently. So, I am an adult now, so I'm really comfortable being out and open with my gayness, right? But as a kid, you can't tell because I'm so white, unless I say my name and pronounce it correctly, that maybe my parents are from somewhere else. And so I think that we have to make a distinction, even though I may be a minority in certain categories, there's a really different distinction between being a minority that can pass in some instances and one that cannot. I think that's why we wanted to drive this conversation today, because even just as, even if I wasn't half Mexican, right? Even if I just had immigrant parents from some European country, which is the overwhelming majority of folks in Bristol County's background is from some immigrant country in Europe, right? Those people, people in my mother's own family will say, well, we were discriminated against when we got here, too bad, suck it up. It's really different because you cannot pass if you're black. You can't pass if you have hair that's a certain texture. If you're mixed and you're a little bit on the darker side, there's no way that that's not a visible part of what has been historically in our country and even in liberal Massachusetts, systemic racism that was embedded in our laws, right? And so I don't want to go off on a tangent. I'm a lawyer, so I tend to talk a lot. I apologize. But so we don't see, I used to be a public defender here. We don't see as much racism that's overt here because a lot of it is really covert. And so overwhelmingly Bristol County is white, but we have a really high proportion of arrests that happen for black and brown people, which doesn't make sense if race isn't an element there because the majority of the population is white. So statistically, the majority of the arrests, percentage based, should be of white people, not of black and brown people. Getting back to part of what the chief said earlier, one of the questions I had for you is, so there's 8 black officers. When I was younger, I knew Officer Steve Tavares as the only black officer on the force. And if there was another one, he worked in the building all the time because I never saw him. I feel like the number 8 is so sad that it's heartbreaking at this point. I understand it also as a function of the statistics of our demographics here. However, if you're trying to recruit more inclusive and reflective police officers, reflective meaning reflective of the community now, right? If you're trying to recruit more first generation immigrant officers, more black officers, more Asian officers, I believe Officer Juan, are you the only Asian officer on the force?
No, there's quite a few.
Actually,
yes.
That's fantastic. But also more officers that speak a variety of languages, more LGBTQ plus identified officers. My question for you, as somebody who, I'm a veteran, I was in the U.S. Army Reserve, I was a military police officer. But as you can see, I said I was a public defender, not a prosecutor. I didn't go into CBP when they offered me the job. I didn't go do my police exam. That was a really conscious choice based on organizational culture. The organizational culture that even recently I witnessed in the conversations between prosecutors and police officers in the courtroom about how they discuss my clients. My clients are this community that you're supposed to serve and protect. So when I hear you speak with a prosecutor and a prosecutor speak like that about my client in a derogatory way, about whatever it is, I don't feel like that's a place I want to work. That's not a culture I want to put myself in for 60 hours a week where I have to listen to that stuff that I left way back in high school. I moved on from that. So my question is, as the recruiting process gets going here, what is your organizational culture? So is somebody like me, is somebody who's 15 or 16 and has seen their brother or sister pulled over and has been pat frisked, are they going to want to come work for the Fall River Police Department? Are they going to feel welcome? Or are they going to feel like, I just started working here and I'm the one stealing, right?
Marquise, you just went through the process most recently, so why don't you answer that?
Can I just intervene?
Sure.
I'm sorry, Chief. That happened 30 years ago.
Right,
So, do you know what I mean?
But I'm asking about...
We don't want to get into
No.
the same stuff either.
No. But I'm just saying, we have a long way to go. I'm not saying that. But I'm saying that we've come a long way also. Do you know what I mean?
I'm
Is
sure.
that fair?
I'm sure.
And we do have quite a few LGBT officers. Probably more than we have female officers or African American officers.
I do want to know what it's like now. I recognize that happened to him a long time ago,
Yeah.
but there's still only 8 black officers, right? So why is that?
I'm going to have Marquise kind of go through that because he's the most recent. I don't know if you're familiar, but we have some. We don't really control. We have some control over the hiring, but we're civil service department.
Right.
So what we're going to do, well, my vision, if you will, is to how do I get those potential candidates, those minority candidates, if you will, to have an interest in taking the exam in Fall River.
Right, and that's kind of my question, right? Like, there's a lot of choices of career paths, right, that are a lot easier, a lot less stressful, right? Why do I want to do this job, and am I going to feel good at work and safe at work, or is it just going to be more stressful to deal with these people?
So obviously, I've been on for a couple of years now. July 2nd makes exactly 2 years ago on the streets. Honestly, I can say from being in this department, which is mostly a white department, but also Fall River, as a city, is a mostly white city. What you were saying about before, like, there's a lot of people of color getting arrested more than whites, but the demographic of the city, I can tell you right now, I can count on both my hands how many black people I arrested, and I've arrested hundreds of white people. Honestly, is there racism in the city? Of course there is. The past couple of weeks, especially from what happened to George Floyd, by my own brothers and sisters of color, I've been called Uncle Tom, I've been called a nigger, I've been called a traitor. I'm part of the problem, I'm part of the cult that doesn't care about me. In this police department, that is merely a white police department, I personally, I can speak for myself, have not experienced any racism for any officer in this department. That's me personally, my past 3 years. I know what happened 20 years ago, 30 years ago, that's a different era, that's not my era. All right. Granted, a lot of the officers on this department too, I would say over 50% of them have probably less than 10 years on the job are a younger crowd, you know what I'm saying? Most of them from the city. But do I feel at home in the city? I made it my home 7 years ago. I came on this job expecting to be called every name in the book from all walks of life. I've been called racist from whites, I've been called racist from blacks, you know?
That's how I want to recruit.
You gotta change it, right? We have to change the police mentality. That's what we have to do. If we recruit people, we have to change it. Just like you said, you don't want to come to an organization like this, so we have to change that organization, right? It's not hard to do. It's just talking. It's just speaking to them because you already have that mindset that the police are this big bad wolf, but we're not that big bad wolf. You know what I mean? So we have to come out there, and the only way we're going to make a change is, again, I told you we're black and white. We're civil service. Take the test. Get high on the test. You get it on the job. You get on the job, now we work it, right? I understand he hasn't had, I'll tell you what, not even 3 weeks ago, I was sitting in the courtroom with another police officer, white police officer. He had brought up another police officer, and I said, I don't know about that guy. And I was just really joking. I said, I don't know about that guy. He says, no, I've never heard him say anything bad. He goes, I've heard a lot of people say nigger, but not him. And as soon as he said that to me, I'm just looking at him like, are you kidding me right now? You know what I mean? It happens. You can't change anyone. You're not going to change people like that, right? Consequences mean everything. So once we start getting some consequences for the people that do act like that, and that whole mindset of we're the police. Hey, why did you drive? Why did you park in that handicap? Because I'm the police, right? If we change all of that, then we change everything. The next thing you know, we're going to bring more minorities in. We're going to bring people like that in. But it's hard to do when you're in a city like this. Like, I don't know about that statistic about more blacks being arrested than whites in Fall River. I don't think that's true.
Let me just jump on it. I had a discussion with my stats guy about a week ago. I don't have the numbers here with me, but we're not arresting more black people.
Let me clarify my stat, right? So based on the percentage of
yes,
black,
yes, 100%.
Okay, so
right, if there's 100 black people, 8 people, I get it.
Right? Based on the percentage of people of color and the percentage of people who are white, right? A higher percentage of the colored population has interactions with the police or is arrested by the police than that same percentage of the white population. So numerically, as ticks, would be different. And I don't have stats with me right now. I can get it for you.
Yeah, I don't either, but we'll share them. How's that?
I have a follow-up question for Marquise, and this is just, so you had said, and you even mentioned earlier, you've never, I'm sorry, I don't remember your name, but
Moses.
You had said that you've always had good experiences with people in the community, and you had said that you've arrested more white people than you have black people. Has there ever been a situation where you feel as a black officer you de-escalated a situation because you could relate to the person more than a white officer? And the same thing, I'm not gonna lie, if having the experience that I was pulled over by a white female officer, I would feel more comfortable if one of you guys pulled me over than if another white officer pulled me over. So there's situations like that if we did have more minority officers, there could be a lower crime rate, because if someone who just related to the person on a different level, same thing as kids in school, if we had more black guidance counselors, teachers, some kids wouldn't be getting in trouble because they could have that conversation with someone who comes from the same background of them, and they could commune on that. So do you think that you have arrested more white than black because there are situations where there are things going down that as a black officer you can de-escalate it better than a white officer?
I don't think that's the reason why I've arrested more whites than blacks, because in my head, you're either a bad guy or a good guy. You know, plain and simple. Do I think my skin color de-escalated some situations? Yes. Not all black, some Mexican, some Spanish, Puerto Rican, you know, some white. Not mainly because of my color, but also because I can relate. The difference, my background. You know, people tell me their stories. I don't mind telling my story. You know, I come from a single mom. My mom worked 2 jobs. My mom was an alcoholic. I lived in projects. I pretty much raised my brother and sister. My dad was a drug addict. He still is. He's still in our rehab to this day. You know, I've seen a lot. You know, as a kid. You know, I've seen people get shot. I've seen people get stabbed.
Good shot.
Just had a few questions, if I may. Coming from a policy and law perspective, and really, I have one general question that I really am interested in hearing each of you answer. when you see a situation like George Floyd, when you see a situation like the gentleman at the Wendy's place and things like that, when you see Orlando Castillo, when you see all these different things coming down the line, from our perspective, from people who are from the other side of it, we see someone get killed, we feel bad, and obviously and all that. From a police procedural standpoint and from your eyes as police officers, what do you see and how do you feel about it? And I'd like to hear, I know it's,
as it relates to George Floyd, I can't sit here and condone what happened. I can't say I agree with that officer's or any of the officer's actions on that particular day. I don't agree with it. I don't condone it. In my opinion, that officer on that particular day, for whatever reason, wanted to show some superiority over everybody else.
And that's what Mr. Washington has really been pointing to the whole time about people who have egos. And
he was looking to show some sort of superiority. He just knelt there and looked into the crowd with the blank stare to exert some sort of authority over the others.
I honestly think it was disgusting, honestly. I mean, just like you said, no officers all across America will not condone that. It's not what we do, it's not what we're here. I mean, we're not here to kill people.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? We feel bad too.
Right.
I think I want to kill somebody. And like some recently, like I seen on CNN, they said black men are 10 times more likely to die than any other person in America by police. Which the numbers don't add up, because if you look at the actual statistics, double the amount of white people are killed by than blacks from officers. You know what I'm saying? So it makes no sense. We can't.
It's based off the population of black men.
You're right. Demographics, you know what I'm saying? Yeah. Especially like down south, there's a lot of towns down there that are mainly black. You know what I'm saying? And might have a lot of white officers. But we don't depict who. I can't depict I'm going to shoot somebody tomorrow. I can't depict what color they're going to be. What they're doing. They got a knife. They got a gun. They got a pipe. I can't predict that. No officer can. So.
Mr. Washington.
I don't want to predict anybody I'm going to shoot. I don't condone it either, but at the same token, more unarmed black men are getting killed by police than anyone else. Period, hands down, it is what it is. Right. That's the statistic, right? I'll tell you how I get there. So let's just throw little numbers out. 100 black men, 10 of them die, right? 1 million white men, 100 of them die. I can put 100 pictures up and it's going to look like, wow, 100 white guys got killed with only 10 black guys.
I want to add that of that 100 white people who died, not many of them died because they were white. Whereas the black people...
Well, we're assuming this, right? Now we're assuming this, right? We're assuming that because they're black.
In some of these situations...
So I take it like this. This is where I take it. George Floyd, everyone who's been recently portrayed with the police killing them. Look at the crimes that they committed. Forgery, right? Selling CDs, doing whatever.
Cigarettes.
Jogging, right? But then you have white guy going into a church, killing 19 black people, and he's getting Burger King, and you get what I'm saying? So there's something wrong there, right? It doesn't matter how many die. It does. Don't get me right, it does matter, but there's something wrong. And it needs to be fixed, right? Yeah. But for us, right, for Fall River Police Department, what's the saying? 1854, right? One of the oldest police departments in the United States of America, right? What was the United States built on? Right? I love my country. Don't get me wrong, I fought for my country. I fought in the war for my country. I get it. But when does it change? When do we stop? You know what I mean? When do we understand what's really going on? Those are hard questions. It's questions that we don't want to answer. So we'd rather say, yeah, you know what, I haven't been through it. I don't see it too much. But it's a little Mr. Bailey over here getting pulled over and pulled out the car. That's one is too much. So how do we fix that?
You used an analogy of a tree before and how we're dealing with the branches. And when you look at, and this is going to, apparently, it could be taken in a negative light, but I'm not meaning for it to be that way. But all our police, from day one, from the 1890s and 1860s, from day one, its roots, its branch, not just its branches, but its roots were stemmed. The purpose of policing at that point in time was because slaves were freed and they were not working and they were doing what they needed to do to survive, and the littlest crime was putting them in jail. And that's the population density that we see today. That's something that we didn't fix.
Right.
And so when it gets to the branches, it still has that root.
Right, now we're being reactive, right? We're being reactive. We weren't proactive back then. This is before constables.
Exactly.
Right? The police were before constables. Someone understands that. Just like the community policing, right? When did community policing and how did it start? You know why it started, right? To keep an eye on black people. It is what it is, you know what I mean? But now we changed that, right? Now we've changed that. Now we have people like Sergeant Furtado who can go into any community in Fall River, and she is well liked. Everyone loves her. You know why? Because she's a mother. Right? She's a mother first. And that's why I talk about legally right and morally right. You're a man before you're a cop. But again, 1854,
right.
We're a cop before we're a man. It's just not a good look.
So going back, how do we do better? Do we start right from the hiring process? How do we weed, that out? Okay.
Yep.
How do we do that?
So that's so we put I put a resolution together to have that conversation with the chief or any representatives from the police department. The police board, which correct me if I'm wrong, the police board is part of the hiring process.
They sit in on interviews.
Okay.
They sit in on the interviews.
So it's part of the hiring process. So we're trying. That's what you just mentioned is one of the policy pieces that I would like to try to get the ball rolling on. And I already believe that the chief is already starting on that process as well. As a matter of fact, and I have to, and I just for the purpose of whatever, I have to say that I appreciate the fact that you're coming from where you're coming from, because every time I have an idea or a suggestion, it seems like you're right there with me, bouncing the idea off, and I appreciate that. But just bring it back to you on that. I think the hiring process is a very important piece, and it's not just for purposes of diversity, but it's also a purpose of demeanor and how a person carries themselves and their background and how they're going to solve a problem and how they're going to handle a problem. The other piece that I would like to just present to you from a policy standpoint, and please tell me if you disagree, because I'd rather have that kind of dialogue. Not every single 911 call is one that requires a police officer. Would you agree with that?
Yes.
That there's sometimes maybe, and there's been talk about it on a national scale, but maybe they need someone with a different level of training or a different type of training, not better or worse, but just a different type of conflict resolution from a social worker standpoint or whatever other kind of position to come in and help and assist in those situations. Would you say that would be helpful or not helpful?
The truth of the matter is, trying to get those people to come help. Now, I've been working at the school department, right?
Mm-hmm.
Try and get the mobile crisis to come out.
Oh yeah.
3, 4, 5 hours.
Yeah.
So, I don't think that's.
It's the right idea, but the service isn't in place.
I'm just not going to be there.
Right.
I worked in the domestic violence unit back in the 90s. There was a big push for domestic violence stuff, right? So we went to meetings, me and my old partner. We every week, one day I just said, we're not coming to meetings anymore because you people spend all your time in all these meetings and talk about domestic violence. But when we're going out to these houses,
shut down.
We can't get you to come and help,
right?
Because you're in a meeting,
right?
You know what I mean? So
the resources.
That's why we have become everything.
Right.
We're plumbers, we're electricians, we're right. I don't know how many times we get
marriage
called.
counselors, right?
We're everything.
So I guess what we're having right now is the need for the resource to be better, more abundant. Correct?
Yes, we need. So many, just even translation services. Yep. Just you're trying to help somebody. It's frustrating for us too when someone needs help and you can't communicate with them.
I just want to say, that's what I wanted to hear from you. I appreciate that, and I think right now we're trying to plant those seeds to get those positions, those things in place. Would you say that's accurate?
The things that I want is better recruitment. I want some accountability. And I want training, real training for de-escalation, which touches not only the minority issues, but I think it goes to the mental health issues, the things that you're touching on right now.
Absolutely.
There are places in the world that are doing a better job with de-escalation. I've learned that from my training and meeting people, command staff all over the country, where people that are not being shot and killed that necessarily have a knife or make some type of threats, they're just doing a better job at it. And that goes to a little bit about what Officer Washington was talking about, the demeanor, the way you carry yourself. The only way that we're going to weed that out of law enforcement is by training, learning the de-escalation, using your communication skills more than using what you have on your belt.
Absolutely.
Does that make
or
sense?
intimidation or anything like that. I also, like the rest of you, I really do appreciate your time. This is valuable. Not a lot of people might agree, but I think this is a very valuable situation that we're in right now. Thank you for your time on it.
I think it depends on where you are in your life. You know what I mean? As police officers or kids, or I think that obviously as you get older, you're more patient. You learn more. When I came on, and to where the police department is now is like night and day. I walked into the roll call room and everybody was like, "We're not taking you. You can't ride with me. No way. My wife will have a fit. 19-year-old kid in my car." Well, you know, like, and I was just like, okay, where am I going to go? You know, and the lieutenant's like, "Oh, okay, you can go give out subpoenas all night." You know, okay, I'll do that. I was just so happy to be there. I didn't care, you know. But it's so much. It's come so far. We can't ignore the progress that we've made, and I feel like everybody just ignores that. Last year, the whole year, I took over the school resource officer program. I insisted, well, I didn't have to insist, I told, that we went to all these trainings through the school department, diversity trainings, anything the school department put on. I said, hey, can we go? And stuff like that. One of the trainings, youth initiative training, was about college rape. And what they were training was how all of this stuff against women are going on. And they were spewing out like a bunch of facts, and this happened and this happened. But I remember the cases. I asked the girl, hey, didn't that happen 20 years ago? You know, we can't keep, we just seem to not recognize that we're moving forward. We're living in the past.
The progress that you have witnessed, because you're on the front lines and you see it, you experience the progress, you see it. You've been in for more than 30 years, you've seen it, you've felt it. What we see and what's reported and what's in the news, we don't see that. We see it sometimes. We'll see a little, stuff, story on the side. But what we really see every day, now that news is 24 hours a day, we see the violence, we see the fighting.
And do you think that that's part of the problem? I think that the media is a big part. I
don't want to ignore what is out there. I don't want to have a positive story just to negate a negative story. I think that progress is made because we are aware of what the negative situation is. I think that's why we see the progress. If we only saw nice little stories in the news, we wouldn't see the problems, and then we would think everything's fine.
Right, but see the dialogue that we're having right now?
Yeah.
Isn't this a great
dialogue? What brought us here was a police officer's knee in the man's back until he died for 6 minutes and 48 seconds. I'm sorry. You know I seen it. You know I seen it, but I don't remember the number.
And we were all, I was nauseated by that.
Yeah.
Nauseated.
And I think that's what it is. That's what brings us, unfortunately, tragedy brings us to this point. And that's what ends up bringing the need for progress. And that's just unfortunate. So I don't blame the media. I think, no, and this is not a shot at you. I think the media, sometimes blaming the media is a cop-out, no pun intended, but it's a cop-out, and it ignores the problem. We have to stay on top of the problem. If we don't stay on top of the problem, and we try to say, oh, there's all this other nice stuff, we can recognize all that nice stuff, but we still have to solve the problem. I think that's really important. I don't want to take up more time.
He's had his hand up for a long time.
Hey.
Our friend from BCC.
Guys, I appreciate y'all standing up and meeting back here. I appreciate you guys doing this today. My name is Rob Dell. I'm the director of of Multicultural Affairs at Bristol Community College. I've also coached in Fall River, and there's been a ton of student athletes or just that I've coached, and also individuals who I've helped mentor, been part of through my center that are Fall River based, black males. And I've heard all types of stories, and I'm trying this. I raised my hand a long time ago because I had one idea, but as you guys were being very, very honest, and I appreciate that, so I don't know exactly where I'm going to go, but it's all in positivity here. So looking at the situation and looking as where we are, I look at, you know, our area. We have these conversations important, and as a black man, I've had my issues when I was younger as well, with police officers in specific areas. I've heard it from my students, I've heard it from my athletes. So I know that this is not something that's made up, and it's something that's real, and there's some things that people deal with. I see it on a macro level with hundreds and hundreds of students that I've worked with in my career. The thing is we always have these conversations, and we're trying to look at what the tactics are. You guys are great because you guys are chosen to come up here and say this, so I appreciate this, because your honesty is probably what I didn't even expect, this honesty. But I also believe that some of this honesty that you're sharing is because of your personal experience that maybe some of your other officers who are not here today would not be able to speak from that lens. When looking at it, this as a whole, what are the tactics that I think the reason why the community has such an issue is because Eloquent said that it's black and white, what we're doing with SRO, or we've come a long way. The problem is that there's lack of transparency there, and the community and the public does not see that. So if you had made strides, I look at it, where were you, where are you now, and where are you trying to go in the future, and then coming from a place of having that understanding and having it mapped out. Because the unfortunate part is, you as officers, no matter what, at the end of the day, you take off your uniform and you're a human just like I am, and we're people, and you're speaking from that perspective, and I love that. But the thing is now you're left with this responsibility to defend not just yourself, your department, and then people across the country, right? And then what happens is, or other policing across the country, and we say it's not happening here. This transparency, each police department needs to have in order for it not to happen here, because all it takes is one of your officers to do something, and now it's your department, and that's all it takes is one officer. And that's an unfortunate thing. It's a gamble. We understand that. You can't speak for everybody. So there's things that I'm trying to do in my area to be very actionable, and what are we doing in order to solve these problems, and how I can influence my circle, and you guys all have circles that you can influence. Some of the things that you mentioned with SROs, there's a lot of data that's there that's been positive, but it's also been negative. When you look at SROs in predominantly white schools are there to help and protect the kids that are there, but SROs in predominantly black schools are there in order to make sure that the troublemakers are held accountable. Those are things that are real statistics and things that are out there that a lot of our kids and children will bring forward. So what my question really is what are those steps? What are those things that can be transparent with the public? Because we understand policy. Does the public really know the policies that are happening? Do they know the policies that are changing? Do they know, these are things that maybe you can't speak for, but maybe the department can speak for in order to help you guys best serve everyone else. Because I think the responsibility being on you, it's tough. Like it's not what you signed up for, that all of that responsibility be on you. It's almost like that microaggression, when you look at it is, you have that black kid in the back of the classroom, and he or she is asked when history class finally talks about slavery, and we all look at that person as to give the proper answer. It's not fair to that person, as it's not fair to you guys as well. So again, those are things that I would love to see if we're working together, is the next step in the actionable steps, because we could kind of go tit for tat back and forth of why are we here, or what's happening, and all these different things, but it really doesn't get us to the answer. The answer is, yes, we have laws and policies that you must abide by as police officers and us as citizens, but I think there's such a divide and a bridge that is wide that we just don't know how to fill. And then what are those things? What are the trainings that we can put forward to help help this process, and I think the community will be willing to do those things as well to get to know who our children are. Because I know I'm scared to death, even though I am well versed in everything I do. My son is about to start driving, right? And he's a well-respected young boy, quiet, but I know straight A student. When he goes out in the world, there's going to be people that are going to have this implicit bias. The same way as people are having this biases against you as being police officers and serving us, and thank you again for that. People are going to have bias towards my son, and they don't even know who he is, just as we may not know you. And I think that's what we need to do, is figure out these tactics and things that we can come together and be a better community.
So if I may, there's a thing I like to say to myself, it's culture eats policy for lunch. And that's what this is about, the start of trying to change the culture in my organization. Now, having said that, I don't think we're dramatically in a crisis mode here as far as the FRPD. But I think we can do a better job in some areas, especially with recruitment. But to me, the big thing is officers need to learn better communication skills. Some of these people up here, they do it every day. They do an excellent job. They've learned it on their own over the course of time. But I want to learn some de-escalation tactics, how to talk to people, how to pull people over and have a conversation with them, and not just have that cultural attitude of, I'm the police, you're going to do what I tell you, and I'm not going to answer your questions. Those are the kind of things that we want to change, and that we're going to change. And as far as transparency goes, it's hugely important. Right. The procedural justice. We can't do the job unless you trust that we're going to do the right thing. I'm sure you heard that expression. We have to have your trust to be successful. So that's something that we're gonna seek. I think today's a good start for it. We got some additional things planned as well. I'm not going anywhere. I hear what people are saying. I'm open to discussion.
And full disclosure, Chief, you agreed to come into a forum that we're doing next week. We're doing a forum. It's a virtual forum, and it's on community justice, criminal justice, policing and race. And that we're doing, we'll have different police from around the country, really, and then also some which are campus police, and as well as some lawyers, attorneys that will be part of this. What I appreciate, what you're being part of that to be a listening ear, and I think with the advancement in technology, the advancement in just having these type of things will help bridge those gaps. But it's just not one thing. There's not going to be one answer, but we have to continuously keep working at it and doing things. And again, I appreciate what you guys are doing. I appreciate the honesty from the crowd. I appreciate the honesty from yourselves, because that's how we're going to work. Because if you're not honest, then how do we know exactly what we need to do? And it doesn't mean we have to be right, because trust me, I've said things that probably is not politically correct or the right things, just as people all of us in here may have done. But one thing is, we want a better community and we want better lives for ourselves and for our children. And I think we all want that. So we just need to kind of create these avenues in order to make it happen. Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Okay. These guys gotta get home to dinner. These forums are gonna continue. We have a few more things planned, and we're definitely gonna work with Rob. I think he's become a great asset in these programs. I think these guys were tremendously honest with us. Small steps, but the more we talk, the more we'll get to know each other, the better we'll get along. I got to thank Captain Cardoza, now Chief, we still call him Captain. Moses, Steve, I know, Sakan, that's not bad, and Kelly, I don't want to know. But thank everybody for coming out. I really appreciate the questions as much as anything, and we'll be doing it again. Again, thank you, and thank you, Chief. Thanks, guys.